Okay. Let's see. I think we're live. Alright. We're good. Excellent. Hey everyone, it's OG Justin. We're back again with another video for Negated. This time we have a little different format. We're doing something a little more interactive. You can see our faces. We're not all in the studio together because we are not all in the same state. We're not even in the same time zone. That's because we are discussing something that covers a really broad kind of scope of understanding. So I wanted to make sure that we only brought in the best. So today we're talking about Russia. We're talking about Ukraine. It's pretty current, I would say.
A hot topic.
It truly is. Truly is. It's just covering the news cycle. It's the 24/7 right now, and I think now is no better of a time to cover it. Being a Friday night, we are all extremely exhausted, but I made sure that we got some pretty interesting characters and some pretty knowledgeable people, I think, that know a little bit about a little bit. So this is the panel that we have for us today. We have Gabriel from left to right. Gabriel, James. James's voice will be familiar, and face as well. And Zander. So just go down the line. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who and what you represent, and what's your favorite ice cream flavor?
All right, I guess I'll go first. My name is Gabriel. I'm the chairman and founder of the ARF, American Revival Front. You can just search that up on the internet. You'll find everything about us, and that kind of thing. That's what I represent, ARF. Got the little pin right there. And you said favorite flavor of ice cream. That's a. I'm gonna go with mint chocolate chip, just to alienate half the audience immediately.
Polarizing.
Well, to continue it, I'm James, but you'll know me from the guns. But yeah, let's see. Favorite flavor of ice cream. Let's see here. Because I can't think of anything right now. I'm going with the bitch color of vanilla.
Vanilla. Very, very racially charged. Interesting.
Oh, yes.
And last but not least, Zander. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
What's going on, guys? I am Zander. I am a student, full-time, part-time work with the pro-life group in Philadelphia. My favorite flavor of ice cream is also vanilla, but sometimes, when I can find it, I do like blackberry. But sometimes it's hard to find the particular kind I like.
Interesting. I think Bluebell has a blackberry flavor.
Nobody said White Russian. I'm shocked.
Interesting you bring that up. Interesting. But yeah, so we're all here today, and my favorite ice cream flavor is probably I go with a little more of a fruity sorbet, a mango sorbet. It's not really ice cream technically, but that's my favorite. Anyway, getting into the meat and potatoes. We're talking about Russia, we're talking about Ukraine. This is kind of a big talking point right now. Everyone wants to hear about it, and everyone wants to talk about it. Everyone has become a, how do I put this, a foreign policy expert. But luckily today, we are all qualified foreign policy experts. So we're just going to get into it. It's pretty simple, just a little background for posterity. What happened recently was, I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, Russia crossed the border into not Russia and began taking land that technically doesn't belong to them. And this has caused international outrage. Everyone from like Weird Al Yankovic to the president of Poland has stepped in and said something about this whole crisis, if you will. And it's just covering the news cycle. Fox News is talking about it, MSNBC, by taking over Ukraine, and somehow that's going to do that. I have a different theory for why he has entered Ukraine, but that's kind of like, that's basically all the true things that have happened so far. If there's any other opinions, go and step in. I think Gabe wants to say something. He's eager.
As always, I've been talking to a lot of people about this. For example, I've actually proclaimed that I was a foreign policy analyst since 2013, so I'm actually very, very seasoned in this field. No, regardless, we do have this, interesting fact that the Russian military, and I think this is something people always forget, the Russian military does not have a tradition of doing these things all high and tight and neat and clean and quick. The Russian military, historically, is very effective, but it's effective in its own way. It does this kind of thing. It throws a lot of men at the wall, just sees what sticks. It throws out a ton of material and equipment, and it takes catastrophic losses, and then it just kind of wins sometimes. Sometimes it loses, but more often than not, in history, Russia wins, especially when it's picking on a smaller target like this. We have to remember that although that there is a valiant defense of the homeland and this national unity that has been spurred on in Ukraine, that it is only a matter of time before Kiev falls. The mayor proclaimed 5 days ago that the city was encircled, but if you look at some of the maps today, being published by outlets like the New York Times, it doesn't show the city encircled. So we're very confused as to the whole situation. Cities like Kharkiv and Mariupol and Kherson and Kiev, they're kind of in limbo, because you look at some maps from mainstream outlets that say they're encircled, some say they're not encircled. The Pentagon says they are encircled, but they're not encircled. You're just getting all this conflicting information. Then if you go over and look at the Russian side, of the information, they've already crossed the Dnieper in some places according to their news sources. So we have no idea what's going on in reality. I think we should probably try to ground ourselves and make sure that although we should absolutely have our sympathies with a people fighting, we should not spend American blood overseas. And I think that's something that we need to really hit home, is that this is not our fight for blood.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree that this is not,
Yeah.
that we should not be sending American troops to Ukraine to be fighting for Ukraine or against Ukraine, or however it'll play out depending on how Biden wants to play this. But I do think, however, this is kind of an American fight, because this involves a lot of American interests. Something that we do know for sure, and that we have gotten confirmation, is that we do a lot of scientific research in Ukraine. Particularly, we have, I think, at least 5 or 6 biolabs that are in different cities all around Ukraine. And we do this strategically as a way to have an excuse to have like CIA operatives in these kind of com block countries in order to keep an eye on people like Russia and China and whatnot. And by doing this, we kind of have unintentionally destabilized the region, and I will not apologize for that. But I will say that this does involve American interests, and many reports that I find to be quite reputable actually have said that a lot of the attacks have actually been in cities, at least like ground to air, surface to air missile attacks have been in or near cities that have had a high presence of American and CIA movements. So this is whether we really see it now or not. I think this is definitely kind of America versus Russia thing, whether it be directly with hard power or soft power, just through their kind of perceptive hegemony, or however you want to put it. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. You bring up this idea of like this misinformation that does come out, or maybe conflicting informations that comes out from multiple different news outlets. There's been so many different reports of all these cities that are like, oh, we've been taken, we're being surrounded, there's Russians here, there's not Russians there, and it's very interesting. And I guess this kind of brings up the most famous report, I believe, is the Ghost of Kiev. And I believe that we all have interesting opinions of the Ghost of Kiev. I know James does, so James, you have anything to say to the Ghost of Kiev? Mr. Sam Hyde, if we will.
Well, if the Ghost of Kiev is actually real and not propaganda, good on you. If not, I don't know what's real at this point in time, because this is like the first. I believe this is really the first time a war has been covered, almost immediately, step by step, by whole different parties. And yeah, social media is saying just throwing out everything. There's so much information. It's really difficult to really figure out what's happening. And it's a war of information.
Funded, yeah. George Soros funded. Let's go. It's back. Oh, he's still.
Justin.
Okay.
Justin, are you okay down in your bunker? Has the internet been cut off? Have you been surrounded?
Goes to Kiev, bro.
I have this big book somewhere because I'm a giant nerd. I have a big book of headlines from World War II from the Washington Post.
Right here.
And one of them is like during. It was a gift, but still, the fact that they knew I wanted it, it's kind of worse actually. I'm digging myself into a hole. I'll get back to the main point. It was news reports coming out during the fall of France. And the U.S. newspapers are like, oh, the French army is going to turn around and fight the Germans. The French army is going to turn around and fight the Germans. The French army has completely fallen. It was basically, it was that over and over again. And during the, they proclaimed these really weird casualty numbers. I actually don't know if they're correct, but it was like, oh, the Germans have lost 138,000 men attacking the Maginot Line. I don't necessarily think that was correct. But, and then there was like tank expert says Ardennes impossible terrain. So that was the kind of information that's coming out then. I think that even though we're getting a much more constant stream of information today, I think that the quality of information is the same quality of information we were getting back in 1939, 1940. Just this completely random stuff that, reporters see it, they see it with their own eyes, and they report it as fact, regardless of what the larger picture says. And one of the things that I just think is going to happen, you're right, Ukraine's going to fall, but the thing is, I don't think that Russia has the stones to take anything past those two provinces. You're going to need a map for this. Vinnytska and Zhytomyr. These are both west of Kiev. Everyone break out your atlases. Because the rest of that is historically Polish territory, and it's filled with Poles and other people who have European Union passports. And Hungarians and Slovaks and Czechs and things like that. I don't think the Russians may try to take everything else. They may try to set up a puppet state. They might try to reinstall Yanukovych. They might create the Republic of Novorossiya. Nobody knows. Nobody really knows. But I will tell you this. This is going to be a very long, grueling, bloody insurgency on the behalf of the Ukrainians. As long as Zelensky is alive, I think Putin has a lot to get rid of. Because Zelensky has been a very big national morale booster to the Ukrainian people. And that's the reason they tried to kill him 3 times this week. He's done he's done the whole thing.
Did we cut out for a second? Is that why you guys are like having a little outburst?
Yeah.
Kinda. It's happening.
Yeah, so, like the information propaganda that is coming from the mainstream media, and all Western media, as a matter of the fact, is rather preposterous. To the point where you had Snake Island, where the initial report was that Snake Island, that 15 sailors basically sacrificed themselves in the act of defiance. It later came out that none of them had been killed, and really what happened was that they did say that. Apparently, they did say that, but they didn't fire upon them. They didn't just kill them, because it seems for some apparent reason, which is rather baffling to me at least, that the Russians aren't the ones who are just killing prisoners. It's the Ukrainians who are the ones who are doing this now. And yeah, this is going to be like it's going to be just constant Western informational warfare. And I know that it seems like I'm not saying like the East, for example, Russia, but the problem is that we are the ghosts of Kiev. The problem with the Russia is that they already lost the information warfare. They lost the information warfare before that's why they're invading. They lost the influence war. That's why they've invaded. Putin has been backed into a corner by NATO, by the U.S. It's by the U.S. Like maybe Germany it can also be lumped in there. But most
they up their budget.
But yeah, most other countries. Yeah, most countries, I think Greece is the only country in NATO who has consistently paid the 2% of their GDP since NATO's inception. That's it. It's the only country. The rest have not paid that, besides us. We've taken the toll of NATO. So it is fundamentally US and maybe Germany. Or, maybe France, I guess. France is probably another one. I'm not sure of the statistic on that, if they paid their 2% consistently. But you're seeing the New York Times and Washington Post and all these other, and CNN, all these other Western media, Fox News, they're pumping the propaganda, and they're making up stories. And I like I said, I know that it sounds like I'm playing softball with Russia, but it's like you can't. You're like, there's no ball to play. They already lost the game, so now they're invading, right? And I mean, yeah, it's just I just don't see I don't see this ending at those two provinces. I mean, they've made it clear that they're going to invade. They're going to take over the rest of it. And I think that at the end of the day, they're just going to send in the Chechens to do their dog work. They're going to take all of it.
Mr. Kadyrov, Ramzan Kadyrov, the head of Chechnya, has actually requested that Putin, quote unquote, I believe, was unleash his soldiers on the Ukrainian population. I guess we have the second iteration of the Cossacks down in Chechnya. What I really have to say though is that honest to God, Ukraine, we have to remember this, has 1/4 of the total population of Russia. Russia's population is only 4 times bigger than that of Ukraine. Russia would not be able to hold down a sustained insurgency by that. That'd be like the United States holding down an insurgency, the size of Mexico? I don't know if we could do that. Heck, I don't know. That seems very... We couldn't even hold down an insurgency the size of Afghanistan or the size of Iraq. Yeah. We couldn't do that. I don't think Russia is going to be able to hold down an insurgency the size of Ukraine, especially with Europe and the rest of NATO pumping a bunch of weapons and armaments into the resistance. So I think he's going to be able to take Novorossiya and all the provinces that Yanukovych won back in 2014, probably without issue in the long run. But I honest to God think that Putin's also lost a lot of the support that he had in the south that was for unification and that was for Novorossiya because of the fact that they've been attacking cities. And I understand that there are always going to be civilian casualties in war, whether, how hard you try this way, that way, or the other way. Even if you do it intentionally, no one can ever know because you could just say it was an accident. So I honest to God think that when you kill civilians, when you bomb hospitals, intentional or not, you'll tend to lose a degree of public support.
There's two things to say. I think that one, China will simply pick up the slack for this. India will also pick up the slack because it benefits them. They'll probably end up paying for the oil, which we are going to ban, which I'm sure we will ban because it seems that Joe Biden is doing everything within his power to rape the American people via the dollar, via gas, basically. Gas has already spiked up from $3.70 within a week to $4.39. The American people are fundamentally being raped by this presidency.
Oh, that hurt.
Yeah, no. I'm dead serious. Within the span of this invasion, it went from $3.70 to $4.39. Some places $4.50.
Even in small towns. I was in I don't even remember what it was called. I was in a place in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania the other day. And this is, small towns. Small towns tend to have lower gas prices just by virtue of lack of customers. I was in Bedford, Pennsylvania, and gas was $4.19 yesterday at this gas station that couldn't have had more than 10 or 12 customers a day. And they had risen their prices that far up. I will agree with you. Inflation's terrible. Inflation's killing the value of the dollar. Inflation is, by the way, just to add to your point, by the metric that we used to calculate inflation, during 1929, during that kind of period, inflation right now is actually more than 15% a year. We readjusted it in the 80s to make it look less bad, and we readjusted it again in the 90s to also make it look less bad. But I also think that we have to remember that the real culprits of any consumer, thing, and this will get us really bad, is the Federal Reserve. Jerome Powell and his army of, evil little demonic gremlins that run our monetary system. But back to Ukraine. I don't know if India, because India and China don't like each other. I don't know. I think they can probably play with each other for a little while. But I don't know if that's a long-term system, because you remember just before this, a few months ago, we had border clashes with India and China that, cost upwards of 100 people, where upwards of 100 people died. Unarmed conflicts. They were stabbing each other with knives and forks and such. Because they have a weird treaty. They can fight each other with guns.
England. No guns, we got knives.
We got hundreds of people in these knife fights. But
I think that they're just going to pick up the slack for when we eventually ban, which they've already wavered, saying we're going to ban exports of crude oil, or imports rather of crude oil to Russia.
We can be energy independent if we want to, though.
We could, but we're not. We refuse to be. because
North Dakota could pick up more than half of it. I believe is the latest.
Because
report.
this presidency has fundamentally been infiltrated by, and he's been backed into a corner by the groups, the green groups that he placates, and now they're funding him, and now they're saying like we want this to happen. And I mean, I think he just after we condemned Russia, they what did he do? He got rid of oil leases, crude oil and gas leases. He got rid of them. So that's another reason why you're seeing the spike in crude oil, or rather, excuse me, in gas. Another problem is you mentioned that they were shelling. That Russia was shelling. This is the thing. I'm saying
that you don't really have a choice though when you're shelling a city. I said that you can do it either way, but either way, the invaded country is always going to seem like the victim. This is just a fact. The invaded country is always really there are some situations where it's not true, but in this situation, show a higher degree of sympathy to being shelled by their own government than being shelled by foreigners. You look at the American Civil War, and in southern Georgia, the citizens tolerated being raided by Confederate cavalry because it wasn't Sherman's army. They were just like, we'll just let them steal from us. So citizens are willing to take a lot from their own government if it's in the name of this, national struggle for survival, which is a really great way to think about this. But honest to God, I don't know if Russia will be able to take a decent part of the country and hold on to it. But the real question is, and something to put in perspective, I guess, is that it took the Nazis 35 days to conquer Poland. And that was considered lightning fast. What are we on? We're on day 8, 7, 9, somewhere around there.
Is it 10? I need to double check this.
Somewhere around there. And they've taken...
Fact check.
Yeah, because the Kiev offensive has been going on a week and 2 days, so I think that's 9 days. But let's check. I think it's 3 days, so 10 days. 10 days.
Yeah.
And it's really impossible to know where the front lines are. But when the Ukrainian government officially announces that it's capitulated or gone into exile, then it's really kind of over, and then we're going to see a real bloody mess. Because I got to be honest with you, Ukraine and Russia are both very ethnically diverse countries. Even though it's like, these are Russians, you could crack that pretty quickly, and you would get Tartars, Permians, Orenburgians, those type of things. Ukraine's the same way. You'd have all sorts of independent republics pop up if the central Ukrainian government just collapsed, and you would see unparalleled, unspeakable horror, probably on par with the Balkan Wars.
The problem in my opinion, with Russia's offensive is that they didn't go after I don't know. I genuinely don't know about the layout of Ukraine, like when they went in, like how close was Azov, but they haven't taken on Azov yet. They haven't taken these guys out. What happens when the central government collapses and the Azov battalion is let off the leash? What happens? Like, genuinely, what happens?
I mean, you have a good point.
It's going to be a bloodbath because, God forbid, they can amass power, right? And I know this. I think the best thing that can happen in that case is that the Chechens actually get a hold of the Azov battalion because they hate them. They don't like them. I think that's why Putin brought in the Chechens, who are pretty close in the bloodthirstiness that the Azov is. I don't know if you've ever seen if you've been seeing that they've been dipping their bullets in pig's blood, the Azov battalion, and also that the Azov battalion crucifies people. Did you know that? Did you see that? Yeah. And to be fair, there isn't much. It's kind of hard to find videos of. You can find the video rather easily, but it's kind of hard to find news stories about people literally getting crucified. Understandably so.
I have a story of one on the show.
Yeah, well, that's a different one. That was a good. I shouldn't say good crucifixion. That was good for everybody. We love Jesus Christ. We love God. We love that guy. But anyway, no, this is a bad crucifixion. This is a bad one. They do this because they're not Christian, because they're pagan, and because they want to spit on Christ. So they decide to crucify people. And it's very brutal. These people are very brutal. They deny it. I don't believe them. I don't believe that they didn't actually do this. I believe they did do it.
It's a very up-in-the-air story. I believe the only place you can find it is a website called Deep Gore Tube, posted by a man with a wife who is a profile picture.
Yeah, you can find it on BitChute for a while as well. I would recommend using DuckDuckGo, and then you'll be able to find the video. But my sources in the military have told me, that is in fact a real video.
Yeah, this is like my source is like, and then insert crack pipe. It's like, what's going on?
No, my sources within the U.S. military.
No, but
yeah, they told me that that's
you,
real.
Yeah, I believe you. I mean, it's
Every country has its ugly nationalist groups, and I don't think Ukraine's an exception. We see, I mean, these groups have existed since the 1941 invasion by the Germans. You had people like parts of Stephen Bandora's group, not the whole thing, in Ukraine. Stephen Bandora was a Ukrainian nationalist during World War II, and some of his men went and fought for the Nazis. Likewise, there were 150,000 Russians that enlisted in the Nazi armies. So, I mean, this was not just a Ukrainian thing. This is not just a Ukrainian thing. And you have groups like Pamyat in Russia. Pamyat, the Russian neo-Nazi organization, that are clearly in support of the government during a time like this. It's very strange because you have a plethora of Nazis on both sides. It's very strange.
Does the government endorse the Nazis though in Russia? I mean, I think Putin's made it very clear that he does not endorse Nazism.
Nazism to a Russian probably means something different than what Nazism means to the West, because Russia has a very emotional history attached to Nazism. And it's not entirely it's not attached to the political ideology. It's basically akin to saying murderer.
So are you saying that Azov aren't Nazis?
No, I'm telling you we have different meanings of the word Nazi. Because the Russians have an emotional meaning.
When Putin invaded, he had the express purpose. And I'm taking him at his word. Understandably, I understand the doubt here, but the Azov battalion. One of the goals was to get rid of the Azov battalion because they're Nazis. They're literal Nazis, actual National Socialist pagan. They're SS type. They're SS type, meaning that they're pagans, that they're brutal pagans.
So this is a very interesting thing to think about because, as we know, Alexander Zelensky is Jewish.
Yeah,
I don't necessarily think that he would be.
I found that out today, actually. By the way,
I don't think that he would, really be a big into Nazism. I don't think shelling synagogues like Putin is doing is a big, is a big anti-Nazi thing. I think he just needed a casus belli, and he found one, and he just used it. I mean, yeah, that's the strategic thing to do. I'm not, condoning it at all. But
the Azov battalion is sanctioned by the government, right? It's in the militia. It's in their national guard.
I think if Japan during World War II had landed, if Germany or a foreign country had landed in World War II in the American South, I bet the government would have endorsed the Klan pretty quickly too. That
would have been bad as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just telling you that during a time of national struggle, and when you're basically fighting for national existence, you'll arm anyone that's willing to fight for you brutally. It's the same reason that the Byzantine Empire used the Varangian Guard. The Western Roman Empire's imperial guard at the end of times was made up of German tribes that were pagan.
But my question is that why is the U.S., why is NATO allying itself with people who support Nazis and actual Nazis themselves?
The same reason we did Operation Paperclip, because it was advantageous to us.
And is this not wrong? Should this not be condemned by the government?
Oh, absolutely. The Azov Battalion should be condemned by the government.
So why are we seeing media pieces that are praising them and trying to deny that they're Nazis when they are?
It makes for a good story.
Yeah, this is what I'm getting at. Is that this is not as simple as the Ukrainians are these peaceful people who have been maligned, or I understand. I think that in a fundamental sense that they have been aggressed upon, right? But I don't think it's as cut and dry as that.
You're right. It's like when we funded the Taliban in Afghanistan, the Azov Battalion of the Ukrainian Taliban. We're working with them right now against the Russians because it makes sense for us. We're going to regret it later. Absolutely, we're going to regret it. And it's evil, and it's terrible, and it's bad, and we shouldn't do it. But throwing money at a situation is like throwing, lemon drops in a pond or in a pool.
Whoa. We didn't just
one place. It's going to spread out everywhere, though.
We didn't just put money into it. We literally sent over U.S. Army and intelligence to train them, literally train them. And then if I recall correctly, we condemned them in Congress in 2015, and then in the dead of night, we revoked the condemnation secretly, and then we as soon as 2019, we've been training them. So this is
We didn't employ a bunch of Nazi scientists, but yeah.
And I think, and by the way, like if I know this is like hindsight 2020, but if it were me, if I were in the government at the time when we were doing Operation Paperclip, I would have had those people executed, 100%.
Well, then we would have lost the space race.
I don't care.
Then we might be in a different situation. We could be in a totally alternate timeline right now. We could be the United States is this weakened regime, and we could be being attacked for trying to reinvade Florida. That'd be a weird timeline. No,
is it moral to use Nazis to build spaceships? Like, is that moral?
Well, of course, it's not moral, but we don't have a time machine to go back and fix that.
Yeah, but right now we have right in front of us Nazis, and we're not condemning them.
Do you really expect the government of the United States, or the CIA, more importantly, do you expect the CIA to make a moral decision?
I expect, for the love of God, my representatives to make a moral decision. I understand that I'm working with prescriptions here, but this is ridiculous.
Well, the thing is that the Azov Battalion, there's no way to separate the Azov Battalion from the Ukrainian government. So if we're trying to give money to something, as I said, it's like throwing food coloring in a pool. You could intend it to only stand in one spot, but it's just going to disseminate and go everywhere. So if we throw money into the Ukrainian government, which we kind of should, because there are about 1 million refugees that need some sort of help, which is, a very bad situation in my opinion. Very bad situation, especially for the, these poor women and children who don't have any idea of what's going on, especially the children. We obviously have some duty to help them. Well, the Ukrainian government might use some of that money to go buy some weapons that'll eventually trickle back to the Azov Battalion. And there's really no way that we can control that. So we should condemn the Azov Battalion, as we should condemn these sort of insane pagan neo-Nazis wherever we see them. But the solution is to not, cry for the Russians. That doesn't make any sense. They're the invading power.
I'm not really crying for the Russians. I am crying for the Russian people. I think that the sanctions we've imposed at this point are ridiculous.
And the Ukrainian people are suffering on an even larger scale, as they're being driven from their homes and being shelled and bombarded from the air.
The ruble has crashed. Is this not going to bring economic harm that is
Robux
akin to
is worth more than the ruble.
You're right. The Robux are worth more than the ruble.
I don't think that imposing sanctions and the most ridiculous social sanctions, not just sanctions economically, but social sanctions that fundamentally alienate the Russian people, not the government, the Russian people. I don't see how this is going to work in our favor. I don't see how.
He can stop this anytime he wants.
So we're going to punish the people because of this.
This is a doctrine of warfare that the United States used to believe in a much more severe, case. You look at the concept of total war, which has been practiced by the United States since the 1860s and practiced by Britain and other powers for a long time as well. When we decided that we were going to completely level all of Germany's cities in World War II because we knew that the loss of civilian morale would, end the war effort. We are attempting right now through sanctions to collapse civilian morale to damage the war effort. And we're not doing it by leveling their cities this time. We're doing it by emptying their shelves. And I understand that it's, an awful thing that we have to do. War itself is evil. War is a fundamental evil of humanity.
Yeah, but that
Russia started it. And so we have to make sure
that isn't how this works, though.
They have to learn that they can't maintain this kind of, behavior.
But Putin and the government can. They can just buy from China.
That's not the point, though. The point is to make the civilian population hate the government.
What are they going to do? Try to kill him, like Lindsey Graham said on TV? Is that what they're going to do? Are they going to try to assassinate him?
The point is to pressure the government and to stop doing it like we pressured the Italians when we invaded southern Italy.
Russia, they'll throw them in gulags. If they'll throw them in gulags if they want to. If Russia is as bad as we say it is, which Western media says it is, they'll throw them in gulags.
They are. They're sending thousands and thousands of people off to prison. But we don't know where. We don't know. We don't know the circumstances. These anti-war protesters. The point is to get them to stop the war. Putin can stop this war whenever he wants.
But like I'm saying is that we're for example, we're still buying crude oil from them at least now. Now, if they decide not to, I think that would be more important. I think that would be a better way of actually hurting the Russian government.
I think
it would not be.
crude oil right now and gas prices went up to $4.50. You'd complain about that instead.
I was about to say that it wouldn't be prudent at this exact moment. With that being said, I don't think any of the sanctions thus far have been prudent. I think that they're only going to bolster. Lindsey Graham going on national television twice and saying that someone should go kill.
Oh yeah, that was
Putin.
stupid. Absolutely, that was stupid.
What that does, along with these sanctions, vindicates Putin. He's going to say, "Look at these guys. These guys are exactly what I told you they were.
You're right.
They
Lindsey
hate
Graham.
me.
Lindsey Graham
They
felt
hate
like
me. They want to kill you. They're raping you economically. They're raping the ruble. They're raping your way of life. And look what I'm doing. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to retake the glory of Russia." That's exactly what he's going to say.
And I think that, Pamiat, a lot of other groups would agree with him. But the fact of the matter is that we have people, by virtue of being, this republic, is that we have these idiots like Lindsey Graham who go on with bellicose language that want to start World War III with their chest pounding. But the fact of the matter is that the vast majority of the American people, we don't want to send troops to go die in Ukraine. We don't want to send another generation off to a much, much worse Vietnam. We have no desire to do that. I don't think we have any desire to do that. So we have to act in some way that doesn't put our civilians in the direct line of the Russian machine guns. So that's sanctions. You're right. It could backfire. It could bolster the spirit of the Russian people. However, it could collapse the spirit of the Russian people as well. And so we're taking that gamble. And war is full of risks and gambles.
Do what? But if it does do that, what does it do? It doesn't do anything to actually stop the government.
They'll be pressured to stop the war. I mean, what is your prescription to stop the war?
To actually sanction the government itself, to go after oligarchs, if that's the case.
I agree with that. We should go after the oligarchs. I totally agree with you on that point.
But we're not. Why are we doing these? Why are we banning Siberian cats from cat contests? What the hell is this? This is the most Russophobic. This is. We look like? We literally look like Russophobes because we are. Because this has been building up since the fall of the Soviet Union. This has been building up in American psyche that Russia's the bad guy, right? Right.
I agree with you.
Every Russian's a bastard.
You're right. The performative stuff absolutely has to stop. But we have to remember, and I agree with you, we should mostly target Russian financial assets. We should target the oligarchs. We should target offshore bank accounts. We shouldn't be targeting things, like cats at CatCon or the Special Olympics. That's kind of weird. And you're right. It's the kind of performative garbage that's all too common in these age. I mean, let's be honest here. How many petitions did we see on well-meaning but poorly educated people's Instagrams to sign a petition to stop the war in Ukraine? I mean, it's what the meme said it was. We were like, if Instagram was around in 1939, people would have been signing petitions to stop Hitler in Poland. Oh no, we just
petition.
Yeah,
I guess I'll stop.
Yeah, Putin's like, oh no, this petition got 5 on.
And I think another thing another elephant in the room you have to address is the fact that why are we in this situation in the first place? Like, are the activities of NATO contributing to this? Like the like, for example, the ousting of, who was it?
Yanukovych.
How do you say it again?
Yanukovych.
Yanukovych. I was thinking of like Lukashenko. I know that he's in Belarus, but for some reason I'm thinking of that. They actually wanted to. Belarus actually wanted to annex Russia back in the 90s, by the way. But they couldn't get around to it. Anyway, yeah. However you say the damn name you just said. But anyway, yeah. So that guy. So ousting that guy. Basically putting in Zelensky. Are these activities?
We put in the chocolate factory guy first.
Yeah. Are these activities? I think that it's fundamentally looking at Russia, and then the U.S. government's scapegoating Russia for their own activities, right? You want to know why the dog is off the leash? It's because you put the dog in the corner. Now the dog bit off his leash, and now he's coming at you. That's why.
And so the thing is, though, is that Russia's a nation. It has been acting bellicose because it's a nation that's been humiliated. Since 1991, this is a nation that's been stewing in its own humiliation. It was humiliated back with the fall of the Soviet Union. It was basically just neutered. I mean, the dog has not only been put in the corner, but the dog has also been neutered,
yes.
and robbed and starved. And however, that dog was pretty mean and bad back when he was, head of the thing. He bit those children and killed half of them. So there's a good reason the dog was in the corner. The dog was in the corner for doing some very bad things. And so we kind of can't let the dog off the leash, even though the dog's gotten a little bit stronger. And Russia is a nation that's gotten a bit stronger, obviously, since the 90s. The 90s were a very tumultuous time for the Russian people, and that was an absolute tragedy. But we have to remember that Russia still needs to go through a kind of national reckoning with itself to figure out really what kind of country it is, because they've defaulted back to this, this kind of strongman figure, and he's not actually been good for Russia. Past 2012, the GDP of Russia has shrunk. He's not been doing a great job managing. And I know people will blame, you can blame sanctions, you can blame whatever you want. However, even when the United States is in this, isolation, it was on purpose, but it was still in isolation. Because of Russia's mass territory and immense amount of natural resources, if it had been managed properly, I'm not saying I could manage it any better, but if it had been managed properly, the GDP of Russia would have kept growing no matter what. Just the immense amount of natural resources, the opportunity of China as a trade partner, especially for oil. China has no natural oil of her own, and all these other things. Russia could have been growing at a much steadier pace, and it would have if Putin was not so bellicose with these war aims. I bet if he had waited, and if he had started in 2012, he could have gotten a referendum. He probably could have gotten a referendum in some of these places if he played nice with the democratic powers. But that's not what happened, though. And the situation with Yanukovych, very complicated. Do the people have the right to overthrow a government? And protest was absolutely an example of that. When your president's a stooge and a puppet of a foreign power, you kind of want to get rid of him. I
wouldn't agree that Yanukovych was entirely a puppet of Russia. I would think that he was Russian sympathetic, but I don't entirely agree that he was a puppet of Russia. I think that Zelensky is certainly a puppet of NATO. He's definitely a puppet of NATO.
How can you be a puppet of 29 countries?
Because it's funded by one country, the U.S.
So then you would say he's really a puppet of the United States. But if he's a puppet of the United States, why aren't we sending troops to him?
Because we don't want to start a war. Because you've already said that what we're doing now is it's never going to be popular. You admit it yourself that send over troops to America. So what we're going to do is we're going to finance him, and we're going to sanction Russia.
Yeah, shouldn't we have done that anyways, though? Because we're always trying to help a power that's been invaded. It's not as simple. It's not as cut and dry as, people have been comparing this, the United States invaded Syria, the United States invaded Iraq, the United States invaded these other countries. That was not nearly as cut and dry. Afghanistan, for example, you can look at a detailed map of Afghanistan, and the situation was when we got there. Dear God, you had the Taliban, you had Al Qaeda, you had some random Tajik and Uzbek and Pakistani militias. You had some Balochistan national. Ukraine's still a very complicated situation, but the border lines are pretty clearly drawn. It's not like, you look at a map of, Iraq and Syria, especially during 2015, 16, when ISIS was getting around. You had like the al-Nusra front. You had a bunch of names that I didn't even know were real. And so the situation was much more complicated. So the United States, when it gets involved in these foreign adventures in the abroad, makes a lot of mistakes. But I'm going to be honest with you, the people that we've mostly targeted were clearly doing, bad aligned stuff. For example, we know that at this point now that Saddam Hussein had some missiles and has done a lot of good, like Grenada. Nobody ever talks about Grenada when we intervened in Grenada to overthrow that government. But that was an example of a very successful U.S. intervention. And so we don't talk about those for obvious reasons. But the Russia and her foreign adventures has always been this, this much more aggressive type figure than the United States has in her foreign adventures. But we have to cripple Russia's economy so its war machine stops running, so that they stop the war.
I just don't agree with your assessment that doing what you're doing now currently is going to stop the Russian war machine. I think it will simply bolster the people against them, because I think that he at least has a control of his people. He doesn't have control of the narrative worldwide. He's lost that. Obviously, that's why he invaded. I just don't agree. I think that what you were doing is you were, in fact, feeding the dog by saying you should go kill him.
We're trying to figure out what we should do with the dog. Sticking to the analogy, we have to figure out what it is to feed the dog, because we don't know if the war machine is going to keep running, cripple, or create a better war machine. We honestly don't know. I agree with you that this should not have been our primary concern. Our primary concern should have been going after the oligarchs. Under any scenario, we should have gone after the oligarchs first, and I don't think anyone would disagree with that. I don't know what's going on with the bankers in the U.S. government and in Switzerland and in other countries. I tend to have a suspicion of Cuban Missile Crisis.
Okay, awesome. So now we're competent enough to know that doing what we're doing, which is the opposite generally of what we should be doing, is a good idea, right? Like this is what I'm saying. Like, I'm trying to hammer home the fact that we are being the dumbest country ever right now. We are, in fact, the most retarded country in the world.
I just think the fact of the matter is that Ukraine, it's very simple. Ukraine was invaded by a foreign power. We are helping Ukraine against the invading power. We're not doing a great job of it, I'll give you that. We're, kind of fumbling and bungling along there. But it doesn't take, some sort of rocket scientist to figure out that when a civilian population resists you and your invasion, as hard as the Ukrainian people are, and in as many sectors as they are, these people don't want to be conquered, and so it is the right of a people, and I can't, it's very simple. It is the right of a people not to be conquered. Mm-hmm. It's very simple. They don't want to be conquered.
With that being said, I think that the Ukrainian people were conquered, and they were conquered back in 2014.
Then why didn't they overthrow that government?
Because it's the U.S. that installed it, and that's the difference.
And the U.S. has never had a puppet regime overthrown.
The U.S.,
Afghanistan, Iraq.
I'll give you that. That is true. With that being said, I think that was back before social media. I think that was back before mass information. Mass information. What's a good word for dissemination? Mass information dissemination. That's a good phrase. I think that was before that. And because of that, I think that now that we have mass information dissemination, I think it's very, very easy to control a narrative.
But Cuba fell to the communists before we had any of that. And that was on our front doorstep. Mm-hmm. And we couldn't stop that. We tried. The U.S. is not great at installing foreign puppet governments. I mean, we look at what happened after we tried to get rid of Gaddafi. I mean, that place is still an absolute dumpster fire.
I think that the thing about Cuba is that what we were exporting, which is the same thing we export to Ukraine, which is like homosexuality, abortion, premarital sex, sex trafficking, for example.
Cuba's not a very socially liberal country right now.
No, the point that I was getting at was that we did, when we had, like, for example, I believe we brought over, in Cuba, we brought over a lot of gambling. And there was a big, homosexual prostitution scene in Cuba. The Cuban people fundamentally rejected that because they were, for the most part, a Catholic country. And this is why you didn't see Catholicism actually get outright banned by the Cuban government because of how Catholic they are. And that's why you saw that. I think that's why you fundamentally saw them aligning themselves with Castro and the people, because this is something they rejected. I think that in Ukraine, it's a little harder. I think that there are pockets of obviously there are pockets of great Catholics, units of Orthodox, Ukrainian Orthodox, just Christians in general. You see pockets of them, certainly a lot of them. Maybe pockets isn't the best descriptor right there, but you see that. But the thing is, you also see a lot of atheism because of the Soviet Union and just how much atheism had been present at that point.
I was going to tell you, you have the highest abortion rates in Europe and Russia, and that's not by numbers, just flat out numbers. In Russia itself, and you have very high ones in the former Soviet Union, with the exception of staunchly Catholic Poland. Yeah. You have the lowest birth rates in Europe, in Eastern Europe, as a result of communism. I think that we have to recognize here that social ills are not a result of what I would call, they're not a result of America, they're a result of the, the kind of rotting corpse that controls America, which is finance capitalism. Finance capitalism controls Russia too.
I want to address two things you just said. Under Putin, I believe since the early 2000s, especially since the fall of the Soviet Union, that rate has decreased from 1.5 million. From 1.5 million, it's steadily decreased to 600,000. 600,000 is today. 600,000 today. That is a lot. That is still a lot. But I think that the progressive, the progressive decline of that says something to what Putin stands for, I don't think he's a communist.
Well, it was high in Poland too, and they turned it around overnight, and they're a Western aligned.
It was high in Poland, and in fact, they've outlawed it so bad that now you're seeing women from Poland go to Ukraine to get abortions.
And they're also going to Germany and the Czech Republic.
Yes.
They're also going to Russia.
And one of the reasons they're going to the Ukraine is because it's so close and because it has rather lax abortion laws.
I think that when you have a country like Ukraine that has a weak central system, you're going to have high rates of anything bad because the system just isn't that strong. It's the same reason why you'll find more, where the central system is not that strong, you will tend to find more lawlessness, just regardless of whatever government claims to be in control, because there's no actual government authority. If the government can't extend its arm into it, then there's no actual authority itself. You can do whatever you want in the middle of Siberia. Nobody will know. Yeah, how are they going to report that? I could
wait. So you're saying that the abortions are so high because Ukraine doesn't?
Yeah, because Ukraine lacks a central system. But I mean, obviously, we can tell that right now with the or especially before this and during the era of Yanukovych, because a group of protesters ousted the government. So that obviously wasn't a very strong system, was it? But no, in Russia, you have the highest abortion rates, not in the places where authority is lax, but in places like the Moscow Oblast, or places of this high, what I would call former Muscovy, in this very highly populated area that is west of the Urals. So authority exercise there is actually still quite high. But the areas of Ukraine, again, it's a very complicated situation because government control varies from place to place. But I would say that Russia itself is also, for a very long time, has been under the control of oligarchs. We have our own oligarchs. We just call them billionaires here. Or entrepreneurs, or
politicians,
or politicians, or Jeff Bezos. Sometimes we just call them by their
This
names.
is his own category.
Sometimes we just call them by their own names. No. But here's the thing: we're both of us are controlled by oligarchs. It just so happens that right now, it's very clear to everyone, that Ukraine is being attacked, and they don't want to be attacked. Mm-hmm. We should recognize that these Eastern European countries have their own sovereignty. I mean, under your formulation, we would have done the same thing to Belarus. And we haven't, because Belarus is clearly doing something. Belarus had all those protests earlier, didn't it? But I think we know that to a degree, the Belarusian government is still very popular, and so we've respected their popular sovereignty, regardless of what that may be. And Ukraine is making the decision that it wants to be more aligned with the West. And Russia is, some sort of terrible spouse, is not accepting that decision, and is choosing to sort of hang on to the bitter end. But Ukraine wants to move on, and so we should ignore the idea, because there is an idea going around that the people of Ukraine don't have any agency, that they're just these pawns that are being jostled between the East and the West. The fact of the matter is they chose the West, and this is how it is. Sure.
I just don't agree. I don't think they chose the West. I think the West was forced upon them by NATO.
I think
I'm not saying they would choose Russia. I'm not saying that. I don't care what I don't care what they choose. I just don't think that they have agency insofar as they have been raped between two people. It's gang rape.
I don't think you can suggest that the Ukrainian people are weak enough to where they would accept domination by one country but wouldn't accept domination by the other. So
I think that generally speaking, according to human nature, when you offer somebody unrestricted sexual pleasure, pornography, and all these Western values that we export, I think that they will choose that because people are weak-willed and they love sin. But that's my theological opinion.
Combating sin is an entirely different argument, and that's a fight that needs to be carried out in as many sectors as possible. And, we need to work with anyone in the fight against, sin and damnation and all the other terrible ills, which really do plague our society, and it's very sad. It's very painful to think about the amount of, lost souls that are in our world that have succumb to these terrible things, and the amount of children who are being trafficked in various ways. Obviously, always in our prayers, and we hope for reconciliation and all these things. But those aren't values; those are results of finance capitalism. Russia has her own, pornography industry and human trafficking and rape and everything. We can't act like they're innocent of it.
I didn't say they were. I said that the West. Is engaging in these things, and I'm saying that West is exporting these things in these countries. with their values, with Western values.
I think
I don't think it should, and I don't think it should be that way. I wish it wasn't that way. I wish if the West was like this awesome like Christian nation. I'm saying the West. I should say the U.S. If the U.S. was this awesome Christian nation, and we loved Christ, and we hated degeneracy, and we hated like abortion, we outlawed abortion, and we were exporting that, that would be awesome, right?
I would agree with you that we would like to see a much more righteous nation. That we should see a nation that is, more kind to the poor and the sick and the lost. I absolutely think that we are called as servants of Christ to help the poor, the sick, the lost, the needy, the unclothed, the poor, the hungry, everyone, all of those people. And I believe that we should be exporting values of charity and service. Those are exactly values that we need to be exporting to people, not finance capitalism. But I think the fact of the matter is that we can control our own destiny. We can't control Russia's destiny. And I firmly believe, and this, it comes down to a bigger issue. It comes down to the bigger issues of, do you believe the U.S. will be successful in the long term? And because I do, I am hopeful that our protection of the Ukraine and her people, that they will someday, and they can go their own way too. They have their own agency, and they have their own sovereignty. They can do whatever they want. And every nation really should have that agency and sovereignty. But all nations allied to the United States should someday be the benefit of the good things that happen to us. And I believe that there are good things in our future. Maybe 10 years from now, maybe 30 years from now. But I honest to God don't believe that Russia is going to have this, big moral epiphany. And I understand they're reporting a higher number of Christians, but a lot of these other metrics of, the health of society are not going up. You only see those numbers going up in a society like Hungary, which, by the way, is in NATO. So that's a different thing.
Yeah, I just fundamentally, I always say fundamentally, but ultimately, that's a better word. I just think that the U.S. empire is a nation built on lies, and I think that it doesn't put America first. The American regime does not put America first, and I think because of that, it will fundamentally lose this engagement, this economic engagement, essentially. And I think we're doomed to fail because of that, because we don't put America first, because we don't actually export Christian values. We don't care about Christianity. We're not a Christian nation.
I think that something that we can all kind of agree on is that the West, and particularly America, is not has not been very successful, at least morally speaking, and we have a lot of faults, and I think that's something that we can definitely fix. And I do agree with Zander here that putting America first as Americans would definitely help us and definitely push us towards where we need to be. This idea that maybe coming to sprout out that, or maybe not, maybe we've just had this idea. We've had this idea since I've been alive, at least, is that America's like the world police, and we need to get involved in all conflict, and that all conflict is somehow our responsibility, because just because we are the most powerful, it means that we have to have our fingers in everything. I don't think that's true, and that can actually be extremely harmful, not only for ourselves, but as this conversation has brought up, it's also harmful for other countries. We're talking about Afghanistan, talking about places in South America, Colombia, for example, Cuba as well. I mean, we're very good at being inconsistent. I think that's something positive that we can say about our foreign policy stance, or our methods. And I think we've had a very interesting discussion. I think it's very productive. We got a lot of interesting ideas, and we definitely did talk about Russia and Ukraine, but we talked very big picture, and I think that's something that a lot of people aren't talking about, which is why I think this is probably, and I don't mean to toot our horns, but this is what makes us a better show than anything else that we've seen on that I've seen personally on the internet so far. So I thank you guys for both being on, and I guess I have to get going real quick soon too. I got a meeting with my mother and my father. But I guess to end us off really quick, let's do something a little lighthearted. But still related to the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. We all have differing opinions on what Putin's goal may be. Mine may be a little far-fetched. I can give reasoning for it, but I mean, if there's any interesting theories that you have or may have heard, maybe you can air them out. Maybe Putin wants to only take Kiev, as Luke in our live chat has said. He's like, Kiev is a very what do you say? Something along the lines of like Kiev is very
It's got a lot of victory points, as we'd say in the Hoi community.
Yes. Russia doesn't need anything past Kiev. Those regions are much less resource rich than what they've taken already. So maybe Putin is just going for resources and this that kind of resource domination over Ukraine, or maybe he wants to go further. I mean, what are y'all's opinions? Any funny, quirky ideas?
He's not going to take the former Polish lands. He's going to try to expand up to the borders of the old Soviet Union. But I don't think he's going to go into, the places that used to be Poland, because he'd get into I think that at that point, a country like Poland would intervene, or Hungary, or Romania. We get all sorts of stuff going right there.
Yeah. And if he does take Ukraine, he destroys the quote unquote buffer area between all this small, like much smaller, like former Union countries or whatnot. And I don't know. He could just be crazy. Who knows?
If you want to, do you want a wacky take?
Yeah, give me a wacky take.
I've got two. You want two? Can I get two?
Yeah, you can give as many as you want. Yeah.
Sure.
So here's one. All right, let's do the less wacky take, but the little wacky. He was good friends before this with Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum, which is very concerning. Russia had signed on to work with the World Economic Forum. Now, since the invasion, that has been scrubbed, right? So two things are possible. One, they're trying to cover them. This is actually a globalist ploy for some sort of wacky, totalitarian takeover. That's one possibility. The second is that he was in bed with the globalists, with the World Economic Forum, and he decided that he was going to go rogue because he was tired of the BS from the World Economic Forum. The other, more wacky, and I actually have evidence for this. I've been doing a literature review and also a research proposal on this. I would love to do research on this and see if there, I'd love to. I'd rather write a book on this, honestly. Is that Putin may actually believe that he is the heir to the Tsardom of Russia, and he may actually. But the thing, I think that it's more wacky because you have to understand how Russian theology is. And that Russian theology actually stresses it as a doctrine known as Third Rome. The Third Rome theory is the idea that the Tsar inherit. I'm serious. Yeah,
You're absolutely right. Zia and I disagree on a lot of stuff. I will never doubt that man's scholarship, though. We've done some very good research together, and I'd be glad to refer to you. You should look into Konstantin Rodzaevsky. He wrote a lot about this, about Russia being the Third Rome, about the Narod, about the people. Konstantin Rodzaevsky. I can send you some stuff later.
Yeah,
there's all sorts of documents that he wrote. And he was Russian fascism. He actually didn't understand what fascism was and accidentally made it a whole new ideology. He just called himself a fascist. But no, you're absolutely right. That's something very interesting. And Putin could believe himself to be. And here's another schizo thing for you. Putin is related to Rasputin. Very, very.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
They are very distant cousins. Vladimir Putin is related to Rasputin.
I think that it's it lends even more credence when you start to look at how the religious I think he actually is religious. I genuinely believe that he is a religious man. I don't buy that he uses the. I mean, I think obviously as a leader, as Constantine would have used it as. I'm not saying he's Constantine, but there are people actually who say that he might be the next Constantine. I don't agree with that. I think that's a little far-fetched. But yeah, the Third Rome theory is the idea that the Tsardom, the power of Rome. So Rome fell into heresy. This is a bit complicated, I'll be quick. In Orthodox theology, that they have a very strange view of Petrine authority, different from the Catholics. That a certain power, a certain head of Christendom, the visible head of Christendom, transferred from Rome to Constantinople after Rome fell into heresy, after he had declared himself the Pope. And then, and it's like 1284 is the general dating for that, but that's neither here nor there. After that, Constantinople fell.
1453.
In 1453, Constantinople fell. And they also say that it fell into heresy after they had done the Reunion Council of Florence, right? And then the idea is that the Petrine authority transferred over via way of a princess of the last emperor of Byzantium.
Last daughter of Constantine XI, who married... This is a very interesting story. The Russian prince who married her refused to convert to Christianity, but on the way to the marriage with her, he was blinded. And it was only when he converted that his sight was restored.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I think that could just be... I think that is more like...
That's the official story. That's the official story.
That lends credence to their theory, but I think that it's possible that happened. It was just them. It was basically just them being Christian. By the way, they sometimes say that like another way that Rome or that the power of Byzantium is transferred over to Moscow rather is because they were a Eastern Christian nation. It's actually not true. The first Christians were actually Catholic in Russia. They were Catholic. They were explicitly like papists. So, yeah, I think that it's very possible that he believes himself to actually be the next head of Christendom.
Interesting.
So.
Those are some wacky and some plausible, actually, even theories. Mine is... my theory focuses more on something that I'm more familiar with, which is oil. So... as many people know, as many people kind of understand it to be, is that when Russia went into Afghanistan, that was considered kind of like it wasn't very successful, a failure, if you will. And so that's why they are not as hegemonic in the Middle East as they would like to be. So by taking Ukraine, the entirety of Ukraine, it allows them to have that buffer between them and the NATO countries that is well monitored. And something that they've also been doing recently, that I have on good authority that they are doing, is they are currently, right now, building pipelines into China. These oil and natural gas pipelines are going to supply the entirety of China right now. And that is going to be extremely devastating to the international fossil fuel industry. It's going to destabilize kind of OPEC and American oil as well. And then Biden cutting off oil drilling and whatnot is just terrible for this, because then it lends to this idea. And Putin has Germany by the balls right now because of that pipeline that goes into Europe. The reason why the EU is not so adamant at allowing Ukraine to join the EU, which is something that Ukraine has asked the EU if they can join the EU. They haven't been like, oh yeah, sure, go ahead, or no, not really, because they don't want to anger Putin and then have their natural gas pipeline shut. But by going through Ukraine and taking Europe, they will be able to have the Middle East pretty much surrounded from all sides, from China and through Europe, in order to have a more, perhaps if not hard power, a soft power kind of hegemony over that region, which will allow him to then monopolize the oil industry and make Russia the oil capital of the world, thus making the American dollar worth nothing, and then probably transfer over to the Chinese renminbi instead of the ruble, since the ruble is worth less than a Robux right now. But that's kind of my more economic theory. I trust that Putin is a smart man, but maybe he's not thinking so like, yes, I'm Rasputin's son, so I get to become the Tsar and I will establish a new Catholic Church kind of thing. Maybe he is. I mean, we don't know. We don't know these things. So it's just
maybe we're playing chess and he's just playing 4D chess.
I mean, he probably just playing a completely different game. He's playing battleships right now, and he's not playing battleships.
Yeah. I think that my theory is basically just like the USSR, like he's trying to like get the USSR back together, but like instead it's just like I'm literally like I think that he just like, I want the Russian Empire back. I want like
here, I got something for you. Zander. It's 18 pages of a book about Russian messianism. Because, I just have these for some reason. You should read them. I think you'd agree with a lot of the stuff that they're saying. It plays into your theories, but no, I just, to finish this off...
Russian messianism, interesting.
Yeah, they believe themselves to be a messianic nation. Not just a messianic nation. It's very interesting. But, no, in final resolution, Russia is not recovered from the national humiliation of the breakup of the Soviet Union. Putin probably personally hasn't recovered from it either. Russia, in my opinion, is the aggressor in this kind of war. We should support the Ukrainians humanitarianly, and we should maintain some other things here and there. But under no circumstances should we send American troops to go die in another foreign country in another foreign conflict. Under no circumstances, especially not here. This is not ours. We should help the people. We should pray for the people. But I don't want to see 10,000 flag-draped coffins coming back from Ukraine. I don't think anyone does.
Yeah. Also, we kind of want to avoid two nuclear powers going to war in a conventional ground style.
We should go after China. We should go after China. That's what we really need to go after.
Yeah, that's racist. Yeah. But anyway, thank you.
You would know.
Yeah, I would know about racism, wouldn't I?
Well, only the People's Republic of China, not the Republic of China.
Okay, all right.
We should just absorb Taiwan.
That's just pandering now. Anyway,
51st state Taiwan.
51st state. Actually, that's a. We'll have to do a stream on that, on the
52nd Alberta, 53rd Manitoba.
On the legitimacy of the state of Taiwan, but I mean, I think this was a very productive discussion. It was a very nice stream. I had a lot of fun. I'm really glad that all of you are here today. Thank you for being on here. Gabe on the left, I guess, was kind of a last minute thing. He only found out about this today. So big thanks for coming on such short notice. Because
all the people who agreed to this just didn't.
If you ever need
just complete dodge.
Yeah, Z knows this. I can talk for hours.
It's true.
Yes, he can. He very much can. It's very true. The many such cases, and a lot of people are talking about this right now. I'm just saying.
Well, mostly me.
It's true. You're
mostly him, though.
Yeah, we be doing talking. This is true. I mean, many fail to consider that Gabe here knows a little too much about a little too many things, which is why...
Oh, God, that makes it sound like they're going to kill me.
Perhaps. But luckily my name isn't Hillary, so we're good. We're clean. We're clear. But thank you for having me on the show. Thank you, James. We plan, and Zander. Yes. We planned this at least a week in advance, so we've been kind of mentally preparing for this. And yeah, we had a lot of fun.
And you had like 10 people. They had a week notice. None of them made it.
None of them.
Only us.
I'm calling them out.
This is how it is. Ethan. This is how it is running a podcast. That's why Z and I Z would always show up. He's a reliable fellow. We would just be talking about completely insane stuff for like 2 hours. You remember that, Z? We go off.
True.
I've told too many people who John Money are. Everyone, Google John Money. You will be scarred for life. Google John Money. He invented the word gender.
Listen, do not. Okay, I want you all to know that like they're literally like sex trafficking Ukrainian women right now. Like there already is like, do you know what a casting couch is?
You're putting such a damper on our final moment.
Casting couches. They're literally doing them, and they provide the context for the war in the video.
Justin, play your outro music.
Yeah, cut the feed, man. Cut the feed.
Thanks for tuning in, viewers. If you liked the video, leave a like. If you disliked the video, leave a like. If you have any comments, concerns, qualms, questions, quibbles, leave them down in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you to everyone who participated.
Dislike because YouTube removed it.
Oh yeah, actually, yeah, you can't dislike anymore. That's illegal. YouTube decided it was illegal.
You can only like now.
You can
like if you dislike the video. Like if you dislike the video. You have no choice.
You have no choice. But you know who did have a choice? The people who tuned in live. And I'm really appreciative of all the people that did tune in live. Thank you to all those people. And for commenting, we couldn't get any of those. Usually what I like to say at the beginning of the stream is if anyone has any questions, you can ask them. But I forgot to say that. But yeah, just I guess the standard.
I mean, a lot of stuff happened beforehand. You're good.
Yeah, so many things happened. So many things. So thanks for tuning in. I'll be seeing y'all next week, probably on Monday when that Probably when the anti-Russian sentiment video comes out, when I'm done writing that. We'll see you next week. And don't forget, we are the Ghosts of Kiev. And that's all she wrote.